welcome to BIA Live. I'm your host, Kevin Noon, joined by Joseph Hastings. For whatever reason, getting a little bit of an internet issue here on my side, so if it gets a little choppy, I apologize. I will take it up with my cable company. But a lot happening here over the last couple of days in terms of Ohio State. Already have a lot of questions in the queue, but before we get to any of that, let me throw it over to my great co-host, Joseph. And how are you doing, man?
Kevin, I'm doing excellent. A lot of big news happening over the past 48 hours or so when it comes to Buckeye recruiting and the team in general. So I'm excited to get to talking with you about it and see what everyone has to say.
Let's just get right to it. Quinn Ewers to enroll for 2021. Huge news. It was obviously put out there. You know, the first major national story, Pete Thamel of Yahoo Sports puts it out there that the possibility is in play for him to potentially forego his senior season at South Lake Carroll and enroll at Ohio State. Then we learned yesterday on Monday that this is going to happen. Not on campus yet. Indications are it may take a couple days to get the I's dotted and the T's crossed and whatnot, but certainly a lot of questions about what this means. You know, I think there's a camp of people who are very happy. There's a camp of people that are very concerned. None of us really know for certain what this is going to look like, but it's here, and we're just going to have to kind of, navigate through it.
Yeah, it's here, and honestly, there's so many questions that come as a result of Quinn Ewers enrolling this month. And honestly, I was a little bit surprised that he did decide to go through with it. When the Pete Thamel article released last week on Wednesday, I was thinking that with him saying that he was leaning toward wanting to enroll early, he was probably going to try and see what the reaction would be, maybe what people thought about the decision, and then would have some time to think it over and maybe decide that sticking through with his senior season, trying to win a title for South Lake Carroll and then enrolling in January would be the best option. So I definitely was a little bit surprised when the news did break yesterday that Ewers would be enrolling. I didn't think that he would actually go through with it, but the questions will arise. So many of them. How does it affect the 2021 QB battle? Which I don't think it really will too much. But how does it affect the QB room in the future is kind of what I'm most interested in as well. And also the 2022 class. Kevin, we were talking about this potentially being Ohio State's best class ever. Now the 2021 class is. A few weeks ago it was the discussion that 2022 would be better than 2021. After a few decommitments, Jaheim Singletary, Benji Gosno, Quinn Ewers reclassifying to 2021. That 2021 class looks really great now. 2022, not so much. So I'm interested to see where they go from here. The Buckeyes do. So yeah, just a lot of moving parts here.
Exactly. I'm going to start jumping in with some questions as we can fit them in. As I've said, we've already got a lot of people online. David Anthony, Texas are busted. Have already started to put some questions in. Texas are busted. He thinks Ewers coming is a good thing. It forces Ryan Day's hand. If McCord is the best between the three of them this fall, you have to play him. Can't start Stroud unless he truly is the best QB. And I don't think we necessarily know. I mean, we've seen small glimpses. We were at the spring game. That was on TV. We got to see a little bit of practice. They always put the quarterbacks in a different county, so we can't see them. We're getting the opportunity to talk to quarterbacks today at 3 o'clock, I believe, Eastern, but we're not going. I mean, as I said, Ewers isn't here, so we're not going to be talking to Quinn, and then we're going to get to talk to Ryan Day tomorrow. So I don't know if we're going to necessarily get a lot of clarity there. It's going to be today they haven't even really started camp, and then tomorrow they start camp, and they're going to be there in shorts and jerseys and, not really doing anything. We're not at the point of install or things of that nature. So, by all accounts, I really still believe that Stroud probably is sitting in the clubhouse with a bit of a lead. But, that's just my belief. That might be the belief of somebody at another site. That might be a belief of a lot of people. But, the only person that really knows that's going to be Ryan Day. And, I don't think it's going to be a situation of where Ryan is going to make a rash or foolish or silly decision in terms of who to put out there. I mean, he needs to. You need to win today. This isn't a situation of, hey, I'm trying to sit there and focus on what 2 years and 3 years down the line looks like. But if there's a tie, you need to do what you can in order to protect the room So you're not having to go hit the portal and pick up 2 quarterbacks to have 4 on the roster.
Yeah, I honestly do believe CJ Stroud is going to be starting the opener against Minnesota, and as long as he puts up good numbers, because can't say continue since he hasn't thrown a college pass yet, but as long as he puts up good numbers, Ohio State wins, he will keep that job, in my opinion. I really think that Ohio State should play this out similarly to, if you recall, Kevin, how Kansas City played it out with Alex Smith and Patrick Mahomes. Obviously, Mahomes was, the more talented quarterback, but Smith gave you the best chance to win. In that 2017-2018 season, I believe you should do that. Ewers may show flashes in practice. He may dazzle everybody. He may, throw those sidearm weird angles, off-platform throws, and just impress every single person. You got to keep him until 2022. I don't think he should see the field. I know the redshirt rule allows him to play 4 games this year, still keep his redshirt. I wouldn't put him out there at all. Just let him learn the playbook. Let him learn from the adversities of CJ Stroud or Kyle McCord or Jack Miller, whoever it is that's the starting quarterback for the Buckeyes. Let him learn from, their struggles, their mistakes, and then how they overcome them, how Ryan Day, how Corey Dennis, how they all coach them up, and then get him prepared for that 2022 season. I would not put him on the field under any circumstances, barring major injury.
Yeah, because the situation is, and I know we've mentioned it on some of our other programming, so bear with me if you've heard me say this before, but the second you put him out there and he goes 8 for 9 in garbage time for 2 touchdowns and all of this, you end up having a quarterback controversy. And then you sit there and you have people like us talking about it and talk radio and national TV. And it's like, is there a quarterback controversy in Columbus? Do they have the right guy out there? So, I think with Ewers not getting here this week, it looking like it's going to be next week, that helps put a little bit more space in this too. I mean, that doesn't necessarily change what we could see toward the end of the season or whatnot, but we're not going to see a situation of where they're playing Tulsa or Akron or Maryland or Rutgers to where people are going to be like, you got to get him out there now. You got to get him out there now. So, and let's remember, and as Texas or Busted says, we're talking about 21 right now. 22 is going to be its own battle at that point of whoever remains, whether it be Ewers, Stroud, McCord, Miller. I don't want to leave anybody out. Everybody's in the program right now, so there's no reason to sit there and leave anybody out. And while you do want to sit there, and there is something said about continuity with your starters, if somebody comes out in 22 in camp for 22 and is 20% better, how do you keep them on the bench? How do you keep them on the bench at that point? You need to show loyalty, but your loyalty also has to be to the entire team, to the program, to putting the best product you can out there.
Yeah, and that's why I harken back to my comparison between with Alex Smith and Patrick Mahomes. You gotta go with who's the best talent the next year, even if the previous guy does well, even if the starting quarterback right now, whoever it ends up being for Ohio State, ends up taking the team to the college football playoff. It's a close game. They may potentially get to the championship, what have you. If someone comes in the spring and is significantly better, if one of the backups does come in, whether let's say, for example, CJ Stroud starts this year, and then next spring you see McCord or Ewers really take it up a notch. Like I'm agreeing with you, Kevin. I really do think that you're gonna have to go with them. Especially with a year under the program for both of them, being able to for in McCord's case have 2 spring practices and camps, and then in Ewers' case being able to have that one. So I'm really interested in seeing how this all plays out. I don't think anyone knows, even those within Ohio State's program, knows exactly how this is going to play out in 2022. They're really just focused on, today, the following weeks, that opener against Minnesota. That's what they're focused on right now. They're not trying to focus too far into the future like we're doing.
Gonna jump in with David Anthony's comment. I know the positive side of the QB situation over time will lead to the best QB on the field at Ohio State, but the bigger concern thinking ahead is, can OSU recruit in a way that you will have 2 good quarterback there's part 2 at all times, since you have to live or die with one good QB, since you have to hope to avoid injury in that scenario. The recruiting ramifications of this are going to be strange and odd. I think you're going to see times where you're going to have to do some roster filler with transfers and things like that just to make sure you have depth. And I know that people didn't necessarily get all that excited about Gunnar Hoke or Chris Chugginoff. I mean, but, they were guys that were in the program that had played college football, that were going to be able to fill in if need be. Gunnar really never had an opportunity. Chris Chugginoff, very minimal opportunity. But, quarterback recruiting is going to be different. Quarterback roster management is going to be very different because that's, of all positions, you only have one on the field at a time, unless you're running some sort of, trick play or whatever, but that's the outlier. So there's always going to be people in the ears of these quarterbacks. And no, schools can't reach out to somebody who's not in the portal, but that doesn't mean third uncles aren't getting in the ears of people and saying, hey, there might be a better opportunity at XYZ school. You should probably just pack up and go and start learning the new system. You're never going to get there. So, you sit there and you think you have to recruit a kid until he signs. Now you're going to have to keep recruiting kids already on your roster. And it's going to be a challenge. It's certainly going to be a challenge moving forward, but it's not something that's going to be unique to Ohio State. Oklahoma's going to have to go through it. Alabama's going to have to go through it. Clemson's going to have to go through it. The schools that predominantly are the haves are going to have to go through it, and the have-nots are going to have their own challenges.
Yeah, this is a great problem for Ohio State to have, right? You have a wealth of options at your disposal, and however it plays out, I think my expectation would be that 2 of the 4 right now, the 4 being Ewers, McCord, Stroud, and Miller. I believe 2 of those 4 will be gone by the time 2022 season arrives. And 2 will remain, maybe have a transfer in, what have you. I don't know how it's all going to play out, but I think 2 will be gone. And we won't speculate as to who those 2 will be because we don't even know who the starting quarterback is going to be this fall. So I think it's still too early to say. But, this is the exact problem Ohio State wants to have. They want to, just like with the wide receiver room, how well they've been recruiting at the position to where Jameson Williams can leave for Alabama or Mookie Cooper can leave, and you'll still have so many weapons at the position. That's the exact position Ohio State's going to be in. I mean, even if 3 of the 4 transfer, like the worst case scenario, you still have one solid, excellent, championship contending QB for the next 2 years or years or whatever the case may be. So I think it's just an awesome problem for Ryan Day and his staff to have. This is kind of what the problem that you do want to have. You don't want to have a lack of QB talent in the room. You'd rather have a wealth of them like they have.
Right, exactly. Going to reset here about 15 minutes in. This is BIA Live. I'm your host, Kevin Noon, joined by Joseph Hastings. We are talking about Quinn Ewers. We'll talk about Jaheim Singletary and whatever topics you decide that you want us to talk about. You are the ones producing this show. If you like what we're saying, you like the show, be sure to like the channel. Be sure to subscribe, hit the bell, all of that good stuff. The super chat's there, everything else. All of it helps us be able to put these shows on. And we can't do it without you. So thank you so much for being our loyal viewers. Be sure to tell a friend or 2 that you enjoy these shows. Be sure to catch it on the rebroadcast. Ask those questions. It keeps the content moving. It keeps me from filling 45 minutes myself just blathering on like an idiot. So back to the point. Texas or busted kind of jumping in is you have to stick with a quarterback until he's a detriment to the team or the roster. Only then do you put in a second string quarterback. Let me ask you a question on this, Texas. Or busted. Ohio State over the last 2 years had Justin Fields as the guy, and nobody else really got in. 19, it was Fields' first year, not a ton of depth behind him. He hadn't played a lot of football. He needed the reps. He needed to go on. 20 is an odd year, no real practice. You're practicing in segments or whatnot. You don't know if you're playing week to week. There's talent behind him. They both get in, but they don't attempt to pass. If you ride one guy at this point all the way, you're not developing that depth per se. I mean, you are doing it in practice, and really only the 2 is getting it, with the 3 and the 4 probably running scout team. But I think you do want to be able to get guys some live reps. And I understand you're not saying don't put them out there when games are out of hand or whatnot. And I also agree to a certain extent of if you have 2 quarterbacks, you have none. We don't want to see another Stanley Jackson, Joe Germain situation of where they have the running quarterback and they have the passing quarterback and feelings are hurt when the other guy is on the bench and whatnot. So you have to be mindful of that. But I don't think that you can just isolate one quarterback and say, you're our dude, we're rolling with you, come hell or high water, and then see what happens from there. Especially when you're dealing with a pretty blank canvas in terms of quarterback experience out there on the collegiate level.
Yeah, this is an interesting situation because typically when you have a quarterback, I'm going to go with CJ Stroud. I posted a poll on the Horseshoe Lounge, and that's what the overwhelming majority of our subscribers believe is going to be starting quarterback come week 1. So I'm going to just roll with CJ Stroud here. Typically in this kind of situation, you would want CJ to go through the ebbs and flow of the season, have his struggles, maybe lose a game in the middle of the season and have to overcome that. This is a very, very different situation, Kevin. You're going to have pressure from the fans, even if CJ Stroud and the Buckeyes are winning. If CJ isn't putting up the type of production that people believe would be needed to beat the Clemsons of the world, the Alabamas of the world when it comes to the playoffs, do you consider a mid-season switch for whoever that starting quarterback may be? If the production level isn't what you believe it should be, or if you're seeing things on film that you don't necessarily like, even if the team is winning, do you consider that? So I think it would be a really tough decision because then you'd be throwing somebody into the fire there, not anyone with any experience, because all of them haven't thrown a college pass. So you just be substituting one guy who didn't really have much experience going into the season for another guy who doesn't really have much experience going into the season in hopes to get that spark. So I don't know how the staff is going to play this out. I don't know how they and Dennis and all of them are going to work things out. But one thing that I feel confident in saying is that I do believe CJ Stroud will be the starting quarterback come week 1. I just don't know if he'll be the starting quarterback when the season ends.
Yeah, a lot to be seen there. William Boggs, who's a great member over on the Horseshoe Lounge, backup quarterbacks do need to roll out there if we're up 28 or more. Yeah. I think I've always been a strong proponent of it's okay to get your 2 in the first half a little bit for a series or 2. I always like to say the 1 out there for the first series or 2 of the third quarter just to see how he responds against adjustments and things of that nature. But yeah, I think the third and fourth quarter of several games in the first half of the season, taking Minnesota off the table, taking Oregon off the table, I think there's going to be an opportunity to get some of the young guys out there and see what they're able to do. And the thing that's scary about it is they're not going to be out there throwing to the walk-on wide receivers. They're going to be so deep at receiver. You take Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson off there and Jackson Smith and Jigba, and you have Julian Fleming and Emeka Egbuka and Marvin Harrison Jr. and Jaden Ballard, and the list goes on and on and on and on at risk of missing anybody. So it's it's going to be an opportunity for these guys to have a bit of a learning opportunity in the second half if that's the way that games go and we don't see any weird interruptions or things of that nature. I'm going to jump in with Ben's comment, and then we'll continue to move on. Ohio State fans that are worried about Ewers coming in early, relax. Competition is healthy, and Ryan Day will always have a stud QB every year as long as he's here. Yeah, I don't see any reason, and this leads me into my recruiting question for you, Joseph. I don't see any reason to worry that there's not going to be at least one stud quarterback on the roster. I do believe that this is going to make it very difficult to go out and recruit a 22 prep quarterback, high school quarterback, because Ewers was supposed to be in that 22 slot. A lot of 22s are kind of off the board. I don't know if a 22 is going to want to jump in and just throw himself right into that gridlock. But I think the concern was going to be that 23 was going to be the year that they might struggle finding that guy and that they might have to get somebody who might be considered a little bit more of a diamond in the rough. But now I think this probably opens up 23 a little bit more when you just sit there and you look at years out of high school. And if these guys are as good as they say they are, they're either going to be moving on to the next level or they'll be moving on to another program to find a spot because, impatience rules the day sometimes.
Yeah, unless Ohio State gets the impression that 3 of the 4 quarterbacks are going to be gone by the time the 2022 season starts, I don't see a need to really to push hard in the 2022 class. I say focus on 2023, and the guy that's at the top of my list is Nico Iamaleava. I hope I pronounced his name right. Rivals 100 quarterback out of down in California. He visited not last month, back in June and early June, and earned an offer from the Buckeyes. Immediately labeled them as a top 3 school in this recruitment. But the one thing that he did mention to me was that Quinn Ewers being present in that 2022 class could potentially affect, Ohio State's pursuit of him and his consideration of the program. Now that you don't have to worry about that, now you have a situation where, let's say, just once again, this is just an example. Ewers comes in next year and solidifies himself as a starting quarterback, and he really shows that first round potential. After 2 seasons, he'll most likely be gone. Then you can just try and sell Nico on the possibility of, hey, just come in, wait a year, learn behind Ewers, and you'll be our guy afterward. It makes recruiting him a lot easier compared to if you were to recruit him, if Ewers was in the 2022 class. Ewers has 2 years of eligibility if Nico decided to join forces with the Buckeyes. That makes that recruiting pitch a lot harder, forcing a guy of that talent to wait for 2 years to get a starting gig. So, I definitely think it makes 2023 QB recruiting a lot easier. 2024 also gets interesting with a guy like Jaden Davis, who's pretty high on the Buckeyes. So, I mentioned it last week when we spoke, Kevin, that this will have a trickle-down effect, not only for the 2022 QB battle, the 2021 QB battle, 2022 QB battle, but also 2023 recruiting and beyond too. So I definitely do believe, in my opinion, though, that it opens up 2023 recruiting, makes it a lot easier for the program.
Gonna jump in here with Texas or Busted's comment. Fields was a guy in 19. The backups were quote unquote get by guys. So in that case, if you had to run Fields, you had to run Fields or bust. In 20, it was different because of COVID. Fields was a guy because of live game reps. Going back in the way back machine in terms of history, we never got to see Fields, the runner, as much as we all thought we would because there wasn't the depth behind him. He was a warrior out there. When he got speared in the semifinals this last year against Clemson, I mean, he went off for his one play because he was attended to, came back in, threw a touchdown strike. We saw other times where he got dinged up, would only to return and come back and answer in a big way. But do you necessarily have your full arsenal if you have a quarterback where the zone read is part of your game plan and he can't necessarily tuck it and run? And that's not saying throw a guy out there, let him get injured. We got more quarterbacks just like him on the roster. That's just a horrible way of looking at things. These aren't Madden characters or anything like that. They're real people. But I think that you do run into a situation of when you are unable to because you pushed all of your chips in on one guy. And then if that one guy gets hurt or falters or whatever, where do you stand at that point?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's a situation where, like you mentioned, you can't just throw a guy out there and say, hey, run it, take as many chances as you can. Like you said, there's human beings out there. But if you decide to roll with one guy, you want him to be the starting quarterback at the end of the year. You don't want to have any controversies or any situations like that. Any outside influence. Whoever you start day one against Minnesota is who you want to finish, presumably in the national championship game. That's the ultimate goal for the Buckeyes. And, I mentioned it on the Friday show that's the expectation of this team. And, it's why I believe CJ Stroud will likely be the guy that they'll go with, because he does have that year of experience. Even though he didn't throw a college pass, he did have a year of experience coming in, the spring game, all those kind of things. He has all that under his belt. And I just don't think any of those other guys will be able to bring what he brings to the table, just from that poise, that pocket presence. I know Kyle McCord and Ewers are those off-platform kind of throws. They can make those. They have the big arms. They can make those side arm throws. McCord really especially impressed me at the Elite 11 finals. But I just think C.J. Stroud is kind of more of the safer pick. The more conservative pick, if you were to say, but. Once again, I'm really interested in seeing how this plays out over the next 4 weeks or so. And where goes one saying this QB room is a circus, and now Day's in the center circle as a juggling act. I hope he doesn't drop the ball. I don't think he will. I think, just based on what he's done so far, he's earned the trust from Ohio State fans that he'd be able to get the right guy and put in the right plan in place.
Right. So, I mean, and the thing is, too, is that as you sit there and you look at playing the years and everything else, if you put Kyle McCord out there, Does that accelerate a potential departure of Miller and Stroud because they got passed up by the younger guy or whatever? So
I
if
think so.
there's a tie, and I know I love using that term, and there's really not ties when it comes to this, but if there's a tie between Miller and McCord, or Stroud and McCord, does seniority play a factor? I mean, I know that we talked so much when Jim Tressel was the head coach, and that he always wanted to play the upperclassmen unless his hand was really forced, and like an underclassman was 15, 20, 30% better, and then he would have to make that move. I mean, obviously we saw him get off of that in terms of Maurice Clarett, putting him out there as a true freshman, but he certainly was somebody who liked to have a team full of senior veteran leaders. Well, Ohio State doesn't have a senior or veteran quarterback, but do you have to sit there and play a little bit of roster management in terms of trying to figure that out? And I don't think any of us necessarily know that answer. I think that's just more of a hypothetical at this point.
Yeah, it really is a hypothetical. I mean, you have Stroud and Miller, both of whom played behind Justin Fields, the number 11 overall pick in the draft. They got to go through a lot of adversity last year. You talk about the COVID season, not knowing if the season will happen or not. All those protocols that were in place. The possibility of not even qualifying for the college football playoff. Those are a lot of things that they went through that. McCord and Ewers, they did go through their own situations at their own high schools, but it can't be replicated at the level that it was, especially with the Big Ten and that whole fiasco. We talked about a circus there, in the previous comment. That was a whole fiasco and circus that the Big Ten went through last year. That Stroud and Miller had to witness firsthand, and they had to witness all of that adversity having to overcome it. I think that should play a factor in the decision-making process. The maturity that they had to go through that past season, and how that's going to prepare them for this year. So if it is a tie, like you said, which there are no ties, in football, but if there is a tie, I would go with seniority. If it's Miller and McCord, you go Miller. If it's Stroud and McCord, you go with Stroud. So I definitely would go with seniority just because of the unique circumstances that we saw in 2020. I'm
going to clear a couple more questions here on the quarterback situation, and then we'll turn our attention to Jaheim Singletary. We have some questions in the queue on that, and then just kind of maybe finish up with other random thoughts that y'all have. Texas are busted jumping in, agreeing about not seeing the full Fields playbook at quarterback because there was no quarterback. He followed up with, I don't expect to see Ryan Day run a JT Barrett style of offense. Yeah, I think it's a situation of where Barrett's strongest attributes obviously were his legs, his decision-making, his leadership. I think his arm, nobody's going to sit there and say he had a huge arm. He didn't have a huge arm, but he could make the throws when he needed to. So I'm not going to sit there and say that he had this terrible arm. In terms of NFL, it's a not a passing grade, but for a collegiate quarterback, I understand a lot of his records were based on longevity and just the amount of years and games that he played in, but you still got to be a dude to be able to do that. And JT Barrett was a dude to be able to do all of that. So, we're not going to see that type of offense again. It's not where Ohio State is. That's not where Ohio State's offense is. That's not where the game is. But I do think there are going to be times where we're going to see a 3rd and short or a 4th and 1 to where we're going to need to see a quarterback be able to sit there, call his own number, and be able to get 3 yards at that point. And that was something that JT Barrett was able to do 99 out of 100 times.
Yeah, once again, this is a team that has championship expectations. Alabama, Clemson, 2 teams that are likely to make the college football playoff alongside Ohio State. They're also going through their own quarterback transition as well. So Ohio State has to let the full playbook be open to whoever's the starting quarterback. You don't want to put them in too much harm, as Texas are busted say, but you do want them to have the full playbook at their disposal. And if they do need to take it down for 3 or 4 yards to pick up a first down on 3rd and 3, you let them do it. You got to. This is a team that should be expecting to compete in a championship once again, the championship game, and potentially win it with how much talent they have around them.
I agree with P-Flaw 317 about he wasn't really the same after the injury. That 2014 Michigan State game was a masterclass performance. How about this one, P-Flaw? The fourth quarter against Penn State and Columbus on the comeback. I mean, he certainly had some games where he just went next level. And honestly, that game against Penn State, that's going to be one that I'm going to remember until I just can't remember any longer, because for somebody that was as embattled as Barrett was amongst fans, he went out there and he silenced the doubters, and he led the team back down from 2 scores, hitting Marcus Baugh on that touchdown over the middle to give him the lead. I mean, the defense still had to hold up for the final couple of plays, but that certainly was another masterclass performance, if you will. And Texas are busted jumping in. He absolutely, that Barrett got him there. Cardale Jones took him across the finish line with Wisconsin, Alabama, and Oregon, but JT Barrett got him to that point. And I don't care if you thought that he was a subpar thrower or whatever. I really have not met many Buckeye fans that sit there and say that Ohio State was worse off for JT Barrett being part of the program. But I think when you look at the quarterback in terms of quarterbacking and throwing the ball, we're seeing a very different guy out there, a very different skill set under what the offense is now, starting with Haskins and then going to Fields and then going to what we're going to see now. Very different in terms of what they're asking for, still moving the ball. I mean, and the offense is more explosive now. I don't think we're going to see as many 27-16 tight games or whatever. I think that this is going to be a game or a season or just moving forward where Ohio State's going to be putting up in the 40s, and it's just going to be a question of where the defense is. And there's going to be that occasional stinker game to where things aren't working and the defense better answer to pull Ohio State's tail out of the fire.
Yeah, I completely agree. Although, when you look through the schedule, there's no real game where Ohio State fans should be super concerned. Maybe the Oregon game, it's a big home opener, but this is a relatively soft schedule, if you will, for the Buckeyes, and a perfect one for an inexperienced quarterback, whoever it may be, who hasn't thrown a college pass yet to get adjusted and ultimately be prepared by the time the playoffs come around. So I don't think Ohio State fans necessarily want it to be a repeat of 2014 in a sense where you have to go down to your third quarterback, but they would like for it to be a repeat of 2014 if it results in a championship. So we'll see where it goes. And Ben Higgins chiming in too. The worst case scenario is that Jaden Davis is a starting QB in 2024 as a true freshman, and that's not that bad. I definitely believe with the Ewers news of him enrolling this month that it really does open up the doors for Nico Iamaleava to come in and be that guy in 2023. And I don't think they want to go into the 2022 class and the 2023 class not having a quarterback signed in either of them. That's just not the way Ohio State operates. I'll cite the stat once again. Since 2008, the 2008 cycle, they've signed the quarterback in each of them except for one. I don't think they're going to try and operate having back-to-back classes without a quarterback. So I do expect one in 2023, at least one at the very least.
We're about halfway through the show, so I'll reset again. And somebody's calling me, so we'll turn that off. You're watching BIA Live. I'm your host, Kevin Noon, joined by Joseph Hastings. We're here taking your questions as you are the ones who produce this show. We come in with a couple of topics, but we really love your questions, so be sure to chime in so you can help direct us with what you want to hear. If you like the channel, be sure to subscribe. Give us that thumbs up. Hit that bell so you know when we're going live. The super chat's there. Every little bit helps us in terms of bringing the show to you all. And, we really appreciate you being part of our weekly show. We will get back maybe to the quarterbacks here in a speed round at the end if we have some more questions. But let's talk about some of the other news. And I only mentioned here the decommitment of Jaheim Singletary. That's not taking anything away from Benji Gosnell. I think we kind of covered some of that ground. But when we're talking about a top 5 type of player like Singletary, it certainly does create some concern amongst the fans. Especially at a position like cornerback. I mean, it's been a minute since they've had that 5-star corner. Losing Singletary hurts, but, they have 3 other talented corners in the class at this point. honestly, if you would have talked to me 6 months ago, I would have said that Jair Brown would have been the one I would have been more concerned about potentially leaving the class than Singletary. But when we went down on Southern Swing and talked to Singletary, he said the right things. But when he wasn't visiting on the big weekend, when he just wasn't very vocal about things, you kind of started to see the handwriting on the wall.
Yeah, and Kevin, and anyone who's followed my work knows I've had covered the Florida Gators from 2017 to 2020, so I did have an opportunity to follow closely the recruitments of a lot of Florida prospects, and unfortunately, there is that belief that with those commitments, they're not always solid until the letter of intent is signed. And I'd mentioned on the Horseshoe Lounge last year in December, a couple weeks before Jaheim decided that even if Ohio State was going to be the pick, watch out with his recruitment. I felt like it was too early of a commitment to the Buckeyes since he had just received an offer the November before he committed on January 2nd. I always felt like he didn't have enough of an evaluation process for Ohio State. Also, throwing COVID-19 and that affecting his ability to visit schools. He wasn't able to take any trips until June, as all the other prospects in the nation had the opportunity to do so. And like you mentioned, he didn't visit that first weekend of June, that Buckeye Bash, the one where most of the commits went. He instead had to visit the last weekend of June. And then Miami, he took a visit to Miami last weekend, and you just started to see the writing on the walls. I followed him on Instagram. I would always be checking his story. I had him on notifications. He always kind of posted those cryptic messages. It really did feel like he was hinting at something. And, finally he did decide to decommit. But, some fans on BuckeyeGrove did mention that they would have rather had this happen now than on signing day. And I completely agree. At least now, and we'll get to this in a minute, at least now Ohio State will be able to reassess 2022 cornerback recruiting. Focus on a couple of guys and try and land one because they do want to finish with a 4 cornerback class, 3 safety class, so to end up with 7 total DBs. At least now, Jaheim gave them a few months to continue recruiting him because they're still going to continue recruiting Jaheim, and then also pursue some guys like Julian Humphrey, Ephesians Prysock, maybe a couple of others.
Right, exactly. And of course, it does bring up a question like William Boggs has here about, do they really need that 4th corner? Shouldn't they maybe look at somebody on the line? And I think that Ohio State went from being at 17 commits to being down to 14 now. So they have a little bit more room to work with. I think they were going to have to make some difficult decisions in terms of you get this and you don't get that. I don't think they necessarily need to go out and get a second tight end after the loss of Benji Gosnell. You do say that they do want 4 corners, but I think that maybe that the position that's, that tight end spot that's vacated could lead to an extra lineman. But I guess it also really just depends on who wants in. I mean, it's a case of you can sit there and assign these numbers and say, we want 3 here and 4 here and 2 here and 1 here and 3 there. But you also don't want to necessarily lower what it is that you're looking for just for head count. So there's so much that goes into the situation, but I still think they can do both, William. I think they could still get that 4th corner and still pick up that offensive lineman, defensive lineman, whatever they decide to do there, just because I don't necessarily see them unless it's Oscar Delp, who Joseph reported earlier has not really heard from Ohio State since the situation turned. Unless it's an Oscar Delp type, I don't think you necessarily go after a second tight end, especially with as deep as they are in 23 and potentially looking pretty good for the Swedish tight end as well.
Yeah, and we kind of got a little bit of some insight from Ty Lockwood, 2023 tight end out of Tennessee. He told us that Ohio State is not really too sure right now what they're going to do with tight end. Are they going to still try and get 2 in 2022 or maybe try and get 2 in 2023, which I believe is the likeliest outcome. If they just stick with Bennett Christian, that does open up the possibility of, like you said, William, trying to get that spot for potentially an offensive lineman or a defensive lineman. Maybe it opens up the possibility, and excuse my dogs barking in the back there, but maybe it does open up the possibility of a Cam Dewberry and Emil Wagner being in this class, along with an Ernest Green. Ohio State really feels good about their chances with Dewberry and Green at this time. And my belief from the very beginning was that if Dewberry and Green do end up in this class, I know Green is an interior offensive lineman, but that would probably push Emil Wagner off to the side just because there wouldn't be enough spots for him. But with Benji decommitting, Jaheim decommitting, Quinn reclassifying, it really does open up some spots for Ohio State to potentially add 5 offensive linemen, which wasn't my expectation as of a month ago, as of a few weeks ago. So as for defensive line recruiting, we're still waiting for even one guy to commit at the position group. I mean, it's really tough to say because at least with offensive line recruiting, okay, Tegra Tishabola, George Fitzpatrick are in. You know which guys they're pursuing now. Ohio State has a lot of defensive linemen they're pursuing, especially at defensive end with Caden Curry, Amari Abar, and Shamar Stewart, and even Marvin Jones received an official offer. So there's a bunch of guys on the table right now, bunch of guys that they have options for. So I do believe though that the decommitment of Benji Gosnell does open up the possibility of another offensive lineman joining the class, which was something I wasn't expecting. I thought they were just going to settle with 4.
Right, and a name you didn't even mention there, Caden Curry. I mean, somebody like Caden Curry out of Indiana, somebody that I'm feeling that Ohio State has a pretty good shot at. I mean, they need to break through there so we can kind of maybe see. We always talk about that run at a position. When you have 6, 7 offers to guys. I mean, they have more than 6 or 7 offers at the position, but 6, 7 guys that are all kind of there, and you just want to see who gets through the funnel and into the class. Sometimes you need to get that first guy in, and Caden Curry would certainly be a tremendous first guy for the at the position for Ohio State if that happened to be the case.
Yeah, Caden, I honestly do get the impression that he's going to probably wait it out just a little bit to take his official visits. He recently dropped the top 5, and from Alabama side, Indiana side, those are the 2 schools I believe are the biggest threats to Ohio State. They do feel like Ohio State is the program in the best position to land Curry. I feel that way as well. I don't necessarily know if he's going to be that traditional defensive end, though. I think he's gonna be somebody who's versatile enough to move inside and outside. So whether he's the DT or DE of this class, we'll see. But Ohio State, like you said, just needs to get one in. I think Chris McClellan could be that guy. Out of Oklahoma. He previously said that he wanted to focus on his school, not his recruitment, but Ohio State came out as a leader that final weekend of June. We'll see if that still holds up. But, there's just a lot of moving pieces now with everything that's happened in recent weeks, especially the past week with the decommitment. So, I don't necessarily know who will be the defensive line group for the Buckeyes. I would wager and say that, Curry, Hero Kanu, Chris McClellan, those guys I feel comfortable about in terms of Ohio State's chances with them. And then either Kenyatta Jackson or Eni White, and throw in maybe another guy like Kenneth Grant out of Indiana as well. Maybe that can be the defensive line class for the Buckeyes. But I do expect them to land around 4 to 6. That's the number that I believe the Buckeyes and Larry Johnson will try and hit.
Let me jump back to this question that David Anthony had asked before the show where he was talking about K. Jackson. I'm assuming that's Kenyatta Jackson. I mean, obviously teammates with Ryan Turner. All right. I'm getting my kid. Is Ryan Turner? Ryan Turner. Yeah. Am I right there? Okay.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
I was thinking about somebody from maybe 2020 cycle. Certainly seem to be doing a good job there, but we don't know. But it's very easy for us to focus on the 2 decommits and Quinn, leaving the 22 class to come into 21 and the inherent issues that might be there with what that means for the quarterback room. But Ohio State is still sitting second in the team rankings with 14 commits. I mean, they got passed up by Penn State due to just numbers because Penn State already essentially full. I think that people like David right there are looking for that good recruitment news coming soon. We're going into camp. I mean, we could see somebody, potentially decide here that they just want to get it done before their senior season, but we have seen a couple guys come off the board. Addison Nichols to Tennessee, Jalen Early to Florida State. So, there are decisions that are happening right now, but, that's one of the issues when you're recruiting top guys. A lot of these guys want to take it to the All-Star games. They want to take it to signing day or whatever. So you get what you can until a certain point, and then you just have to kind of ride with some of these guys. And truthfully speaking, there's still a ways to go until December, until the early signing period. And with some of these guys, I would rather get their commitments if I'm Ohio State come October rather than August, just because it's less time that you have to play defense.
Yeah, and to answer David's question, we're not really hearing any good news that's on the media horizon, but that doesn't mean good news won't be coming soon because Derek LeBlanc, he's somebody that we talked about before, but I exchanged messages with him and he says that a commitment could come soon, but he's going to do it when he feels like it. So if a decision is right around the corner for him, I would expect that it is Ohio State. He said that they're the leader, that no school is near the top for him. He took 3 visits in 2 months. He honestly does feel like a guy who could be the first in the 2023 class. But then again, does Ohio State want to go through with another potential Jaheim Singletary situation where you get a commit from Florida who has a bunch of top options on the table, and then they may want to next year try and take their visits and decide to reopen their recruitment. So that'd be one interesting thing to pay attention to. I know Luke Montgomery came off, really high on his Buckeyes visit. His 3rd visit in 2 months. He could be another name to pay attention to. But in terms of, some other good news that I've heard, 5-star safety, and I reported this in our school session on Sunday, 5-star safety Jacoby Matthews, who recently decommitted from LSU last week. I texted him and he said that he would love to hear from Ohio State. That's the school that he wants to hear from. He said that he believes him, Jair, and CJ. He also threw out Jaheim's name before Jaheim decommitted, but he said that he believes they could be a strong defensive class. CJ Hicks told me that he's in touch with Jacoby right now. Jacoby's the number 1 safety in the nation, and he kind of plays that quarterback of the defense, free safety type role that the Buckeyes are recruiting Zion Branch for. So let's say Zion starts trending toward USC or Ohio State gets that impression. You do have another legitimate option that you could try and pursue late in the game who wouldn't mind being pursued late in the game. I think that's the big key thing, Kevin, is when we look at these recruitments, some kids will not look at that late offer. They'll kind of feel snubbed that a program didn't look at them until late in their recruiting process. That doesn't seem to be the case with Jacoby. So I think that was kind of the big good news, even though it really wasn't too much news since Ohio State has yet to reach out to him. But it is something to pay attention to. As for the 2022 class, I'm not seeing any commitments in the near future. I could be wrong on that. But like you mentioned, some of those guys who did have decisions coming up, they committed elsewhere. And I don't see any guys committing to the Buckeyes anytime soon.
I'm going to reset here before we get to this next question. You're watching BIA Live. I'm your host, Kevin Noon, joined by Joseph Hastings. We're talking about Quinn Ewers, Jaheim Singletary, and whatever it is you want us to talk about. You submit your questions. We'll do our best to get to all of them. Be sure to subscribe to the channel. Be sure to like this video, whether you're getting us on YouTube or you're getting us on Facebook, and hit that bell so you're notified for when we're on. And, of course, the Super Chat is there. Any little bit certainly helps the product as well. We're going to hear in our final 15 minutes, so we'll kind of jump around on some topics. Where Goes One asked about the linebacker core. I'm assuming that means on the team side versus recruiting. If we look on the recruiting side of things for 22, obviously with having Gabe Powers and CJ Hicks, that's a hell of a 1-2 punch. Losing Deshaun McCullough was a big hit for them, on the negative side, but they're still out there pursuing. But I think the root of this question is in terms of the team. I think it's still going to be a work in progress. I think we're still going to really have to see, what it looks like with Dallas Gant, Taraja Mitchell, and Kayvon Pope and everybody else. I mean, until we get to practice and get an opportunity to see a little bit more, my feelings are kind of nothing, because I don't necessarily know what I need to be feeling at this point, because we haven't seen anything. And I'm going to jump right to Yakov's question because it plays right into it about media access. We have been given our schedule, which is always subject to change, which always does change, and we should be able to see some practice. But when we do see practice, it's the first 30 minutes of practice, and that's 20 minutes of stretching and 10 minutes of So we're not necessarily going to be there for full practices. That's just not the way Ohio State operates. There will be a day on Big Ten Network where BTN is in town. I think they're opening up a lot of that practice just because cameras are going to be involved for BTN in the first place. We're going to bring you everything that we get from practice. Activity starts today in terms of talking to the quarterbacks, and Corey Dennis will talk to them at 3. It's bright and early tomorrow. We're there at 7:30 for the start of practice, and then we get Ryan Day around 9:30 or 10. It's our plan to bring that live on Buckeye Grove here through at least YouTube. So that's all going to be there. So, unfortunately, in terms of the linebacker question, where goes one? Check back with me two shows from now. Maybe I'll have a better idea at this point, but at this point, I can't tell you for certain. Bobby Heath, will our defensive line be the best ever next year? There's some dudes. I mean, there's some dudes. If next year for you means 22 with true sophomores, JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer and some of these other guys, it could be pretty damn special. But then again, remember, Zach Harrison came in as a 5-star and the light bulb didn't immediately turn on for him. So everybody's going to react a little bit differently. Now for Sawyer, who we saw during spring practice, the light bulb was on during spring practice. But granted, he was going against half an offensive line playing thud-style football. So, I don't know. But I think that, I think the 22 line could be pretty amazing.
Yeah, Jack Sawyer and JTT. I mean, those two guys, if you watch, just put on their high school tape. It's incredible what they were able to do. They were men playing against boys. Double teams couldn't stop either of them. And that's what I'm most interested in seeing. You can't double team both of them at the next level. And obviously there's going to be an adjustment period, but I do expect by the time next year rolls around, as Bobby alludes to, I do believe that both of them are going to be dominant. It could be one of the best defensive lines we've seen in a long time. And they're really going to force a lot of pressure on opposing offenses because you have two DTs in the middle, and then what are you going to do with those two guys on the outside? You can't put them one-on-one. You're going to have some blocking help from the opposing running back, but then what do you do with the other guy? And then you get into a situation where JTT could slide into the middle. I mean, he's big enough. He's done it at the high school level. He absolutely has the athleticism to do so. So you can kind of mix and match both of them. I really do believe the potential for that D-line next year is through the roof.
Jump to a question by Yakov about any home night games makes it difficult for out-of-state prospects. We have, the schedule hasn't necessarily come out. I would not be surprised to see Penn State as one. I think a lot of it also depends on whether a game is on Fox versus ABC, ESPN. We're in postseason baseball at that time. Fox really puts its emphasis on that big noon, not this big noon, but the big noon showcase at 12 p.m. So I'm going to go out and say Ohio State's going to have at least one night home game. It's going to be there. It's going to be an ABC game. And I think it's going to be Penn State. But has that been announced? No. Do I know that for a fact? No. Do I believe that to be the case? Yeah. So, that's, kind of where, I'm going in terms of that one. We're going to go back to P-Flaw about confidence about Hero Canoe. He's not convinced that OSU's the leader. Here's the thing, and I kind of posted this on the Horseshoe Lounge, and if you're not a member at BuckeyeGrove, be sure to sign up. We've got a code right now, Quinn30 will give you 30 free days, so jump on board with that. See what everybody's talking about at BuckeyeGrove. Hero doesn't have any, he's a German national. He does not, he's lived in Southern California briefly to pursue this American football dream of his. He doesn't have a rooting interest in terms of a team. He doesn't have natural roots anywhere. He told us when he was camping that the weather in Columbus reminds him of the weather back home in Germany. So I'm sure I would hate the weather in Germany is what that means. But I think it's going to be a relationship deal. And if you're going to sit there and say, put any defensive line coach up against anybody else for landing that kid, especially a kid who doesn't have a geographical tie. It's different than going into Alabama and trying to pull somebody away from Bama and Auburn. I really like Ohio State's chances with Larry Johnson there. And that, that's just me. And I do have a future cast prediction in. Was that based on anything he told me? No, I think it was just more of a gut feeling.
Yeah, I haven't submitted one just yet because, I do believe that Hero is really evaluating all of the options on his table. He has a top 10 right now. Notre Dame recently entered the mix. He enjoyed his visit this past week. So, I still kind of want to see how the officials play out. But I think I see what you're saying with the future cast. It's kind of on the trajectory where Ohio State, should be able to land him, considering the fact that everything is even. And you really don't get recruitments like this, Kevin. You know this as much as anyone else. You don't get recruiting processes where all the schools come in with no bias whatsoever from the prospect beforehand, but that's exactly what you're getting with Hero. And with that being the case, and Larry Johnson is going to be the one who separates himself from the rest of the pack, in my opinion. I think that's kind of how it was with JTT. JTT obviously is an American-born prospect, has his own, whether it's bias, leaning toward toward the state of Washington or whatever, just because he's from there. But he really did approach his recruiting process where I'm going to evaluate all of these schools evenly. I'm going to give them a fair chance. And in the end, Larry Johnson stood out from the rest of them just because of his resume, who he is as a coach. And most prospects we talk to, I don't think they're just saying this for us, the interviewers, because they know we cover Ohio State. Most prospects say Larry Johnson is the GOAT. I mean, greatest of all time, the best defensive line coach in the NCAA. We had a question about Kenyatta Jackson before. Every time I speak with his father, he says, yeah, I just got off the phone with the best D-line coach in the NC2A. So there's a lot of respect for Johnson. I believe that's ultimately what will win out for Canoe. Also, I brought it up before, his handler, one of the people who plays a big part in his recruitment and getting him to these trips, is from Ohio, is a Buckeye fan, and did facilitate that Ohio State offer. In a recruitment where you can get as many advantages as you need, you'll take all that you can get. That's a big one too. So yeah, I do believe Hero ends up with Ohio State.
Bobby, I want to thank you for the super chat contribution. Prediction on how many years, if Coach Johnson will retire. It was funny a couple years ago because he's always operating like on 1-year deals. He pulled us aside and was joking. He's like, I need you guys to stop writing about whether or not I'm going to be here next year or I'm not going to be here next year. I'm going to be here as long as my wife lets me be here. So, I think he's probably got a couple more years in him. I don't think that he needs to come out and have some sort of farewell tour where schools will recruit against it. I think it's going to be a situation of where he's going to have an open, honest, and frank conversation with Ryan Day and with the class that he's recruiting at that point and say XYZ is going to be my final year. But, he in a lot of ways, I mean, since he shaved his head, he's getting younger. I mean, he's getting younger out there. I mean, he seriously is operating against the time that the rest of us are. I think in the last 5 years, I've aged 20. I mean, he's getting younger. So, he's not going to be there indefinitely. No, none of us are. That's just not how it works. But I don't see any reason to believe that he is, at the end of the string yet. I think he's got a couple years left in him, but that's just kind of, some speculation I have. It certainly to lose him will hurt. Absolutely. But, Ohio State already, in my opinion, is doing a good job of they groomed Kenny, who's now at Fordham. I'm not saying Kenny is going to come in and be the, his replacement, but it wouldn't surprise me if that were the case. I just really think that there's going to be a continuity plan there. So have that as you will. I'm going to jump in with something from Rod Farva. Darian Henry's mom works for me, and she told me that LJ told their family he was going to retire after Darian's time at OSU is over. Darian Henry Young is going to be at Ohio State for several more years. So if mom, has the true 411, because then again, the coach is never going to sit there and say, well, I'm probably going to leave before his senior year. So, you don't know. But if that truly is it, they still have a couple more years with him. Jump back to Robert. This is back to the Hero Canoe. Schmidt's Cream Puff will seal the deal. They're in German Village. I've had better German food in Columbus than Schmidt's, but I love Schmidt's, and their cream puffs are off the chain. Walter enjoys the commentary and the insight. Thank you, Walter. We appreciate you being part of the show. Big Noon is basically Ohio State Football Network, according to Yakov. Absolutely. It certainly is. Ton of Ohio State games fall there. This one I'll throw here to Joseph, just talking a little bit more about the Jacoby Matthews. He thinks that they need to sit there and push a little bit more there. Insulation in case Zion or Xavier go haywire.
Yeah, so I've been told from a source that ultimately this is going to come down to Matt Barnes, not Kerry Combs. This is going to be Matt Barnes' decision, what he wants to do with safety recruiting. And it's tough because we talked about this before when, the Buckeyes had hosted Jake Pope on campus for an official and Markeith Williams. Should they try and take one of those two in case, Zion or Xavier go elsewhere? But if they don't pursue Jacoby Matthews, which is opposite of what Mac Moses is saying, that really goes to show how confident they feel in their chances with Zion and Xavier. And it's really tough with those two kids because Zion has 2 officials coming up in the fall, those being to Alabama and to Clemson. Xavier has some more officials that he's going to be taking as well. So do you jeopardize your pursuit of them by trying to pursue somebody like Jacoby, who could honestly he could end up back at LSU? You know, he's from Louisiana. Also, I know Texas A&M is making a strong push for him as well. So do you jeopardize your pursuit of Zion and Xavier with the hopes of finishing second or third for somebody like Jacoby, or do you go all in since he's the top ranked safety in the nation? And you know, he really is he would really consider the program, as he told me and as he's communicated to CJ before. So I'm very interested in seeing how this one plays out, just because there's so many heavy hitters and in all of their recruitments, their big time programs pursuing each of them. But I will stick with Zion and Xavier ending up in this class, but don't expect it anytime soon. You know, we've been hearing that Xavier is going to take this out till January. I believe Zion will take this out till mid-November, you know, at the very earliest. So it's going to be a while until their recruitments wrap up.
3 more questions, and then we'll call it a show. Let me start with the first one with Gary K. Will most of the roster that didn't participate in the spring game be full go at the start of camp? Julian Fleming, Haskell Garrett, Cam Brown. I should have pulled up a story that Griffin wrote. I will filibuster as I tried to do that. Ryan Day did speak a little bit about where some of the injuries are. Some guys will be good to go. Some guys won't. I don't know if I can find the article in time. I promise we'll talk about that on the next show. Not everybody's going to be a full go to start camp. I do know that much there. But I just don't have the list in front of me. And since Griffin wrote that story, I'm Ohio State injuries. Using the power of Google to see if I can find it. Here we go. This might actually be the story. Gant will be ready to go. Harry Miller should be ready to go. Seven Banks expected to be back at the start of camp. It should be good to go by the 3rd. MPF there wasn't much detail there. Court Williams will be back in action in August. Remember, he's coming off of an ACL tear. Cameron Brown, should be full go when August begins. Cameron Babb, he's just been snake bit by injuries, and that's really what we have there in the piece. So that's kind of a little bit of a rundown there, but we talk to Ryan Day tomorrow. We'll get more of an injury update, even though they don't like talking about injuries, but I think we can still phrase it in a way where we might get a little bit of an answer. Let me find the other one, and then I got a fun one to end on. Yakov saying that Ewers is going to need a little work in the weight room. Yeah, I mean, he's an 18-year-old kid. I mean, he's not going to come out there and look like Vernon Golston did or anything like that, all rocked up or whatever. But, he's going to be working with a nutritionist and having everything he eats monitored, and he's going to be going through that weight program. He's certainly going to see his body reshape. I mean, even guys that come in great shape still end up having their body reshape. We got a lot of questions here at the wire. I'm going to end on a baseball one, but let's just kind of go through these really quick, because I told you guys direct this show. We'll stay on. I won't say we'll stay on as long as you want us to. We got stuff to do, but we'll do a little overtime for y'all. P. Flaw would love to penetrate Louisiana recruiting. Remember that Jair Brown was out of Louisiana, even if it was just kind of a temporary stop. They don't necessarily recruit Louisiana all that much.
They need to go for Louisiana and Alabama too. Those are the 2 states that they're kind of prioritizing, and in at least in 2023 of Alabama. So I would really be interesting to see if they can get a couple of guys out of those states.
Bobby asking if Jaheim will end up back in the class. I don't believe so. We've seen instances nationally where guys decommit only to go back to that same school. He's lost that loving feeling, and I think it's gone. So I don't think Ohio State's there, and Rod Farva agrees. Miami, I don't sleep on UGA either. I think that those are the 2 schools there kind of at the top. Mac Moses is asking what time Corey Dennis would be speaking to the media today. sometime around 3. We've been told media availability is at 3, so we will get on board there and do that. Probably not going to go live, but as I said, tomorrow with Ryan Day, we're going to try and do our maiden voyage of going live from a presser. That's in a meeting room that's a little easier to deal with a scrum out in the field, but we're efforting. We're going in the future, expect to see video content that I'm producing going live at more places, but it's still a learning process. Bobby thanking us for the show. And then let me find this last question from Ben. As a fellow Dodgers fan, how much are you looking forward to watching Max Scherzer's debut at home against the Astros? Chavez Ravine will be intense. Got to make it through tonight. I was hoping he was going to pitch tonight, and I don't know what the pitching matchup is tomorrow, but in some ways I'm glad it's tomorrow because I have to be at OSU at 7:30 tomorrow, which means I have to go to bed early because if I don't get 8 hours of sleep, I'm a mess. So I am so looking forward to it. I would hate to see Scherzer get suspended in his first game for plunking Altuve in the back, but I also wouldn't be opposed to Max Scherzer plunking Altuve, that little shrimp, in the back, and any of the Astros. Throw one at Dusty for all I care. And I know he wasn't even part of that team, but to hell with him too. That's how excited I am that here on a Tuesday at 1 o'clock, 1:05, I'm already that excited about the situation. So, Joseph, do you have anything to say about the Dodgers-Astros game coming up?
Oh, I mean, look, I'm a Lakers fan. We just assembled our own super team. So that just seems to be what Los Angeles teams are doing nowadays. I won't fault you for it. As someone who tried rooting for Tampa Bay, but then saw all of my favorite players leave, and I just ultimately gave up on them. I envy you for sure because you all just get whoever you want. Trey Turner, Max Scherzer, Mookie Betts, whoever. I mean, Ted Williams is going to come out the grave and sign with the Dodgers tomorrow. I mean, it's incredible what Los Angeles is doing. And yeah, expect another championship and another pennant for you guys.
If they can figure out their bullpen. Kenley Jansen's been far from automatic as the closer. Their setup situation has not been great. They picked up Duffy from Kansas City, who's dealing with a flexor issue. He should give them some relief there. And then once they go down to a 4-man rotation, that should help them a little bit more. Either move David Price or Tony Gonsolin back to the pen to chew up some minutes for them or some innings there. Texas are busted. Click that like button. Absolutely. Like the channel, like the show, hit the bell, all of that stuff. We really appreciate all of our regulars. We appreciate those of you who stumbled onto the show for a first time. We're still working on making a regular time. Tuesdays seem to be kind of a good day, but Ohio State's schedule will dictate a lot of things as well. But we're going to wrap this one up as we go through our final goodbyes. Joseph, any final thoughts?
Oh, I mean, I appreciate everyone saying, give up the likes, get the likes up. I do have to disagree with Rod saying Jordan over LeBron. I mean, maybe that's because I was born in '97, but I'm going to go with King James for this one. 3 championships and 3 different teams, 3 finals MVPs, 3 different teams. So, yeah, we'll go with LeBron there. But my final thoughts, stay tuned for our recruiting roundtable with Carson McRae. Who's our other recruiting analyst on BuckeyeGrove. We're going to be releasing that later today. We're going to dive into Ewers, Singletary, a couple of other topics. And, just thank you all for tuning in, and we can't wait to get back at it, Kevin.
Yeah, absolutely. And my final thought is we're looking to be back on Thursday with Griffin Strome joining me as we have gone through a couple of days of practice at that point, just what we've seen, what we want to learn, what we have learned. All of that good stuff will be there. And then, of course, we'll probably try to return again on Tuesday with Joseph, and we'll see what's going on. Again, we don't necessarily have a ton of recruiting news going on, but there's still plenty to talk about. How the board sets up. We'll be coming off of a great skull session. A lot of stuff going on here on the site, so please be sure to join us. Last couple of comments. Jordan is the GOAT. I saw both in their primes. And then P-Flaw telling Joseph what I tell him all the time. He's just a youngster. He's just a youngster. I have T-shirts. I have T-shirts older than you, man. I have T-shirts older than you.
But Jordan never lost except for those first 9 years, right? We just forget about that while LeBron was making it to finals in his 4th year. But yeah, I digress.
Absolutely. But before we get off onto a whole different tangent, I want to eat a little lunch before going to Ohio State. I'm going to cut Joseph loose. But thanks again for watching the show. We'll be with you again here very